There we go. Recording in progress. Excellent. Okay, so participants are flooding in, Paul.
Great.
Excellent. I can see the attendees now on the right hand panel.
We like participants.
Yes, yeah. Impressive too. Saturday morning, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah. You wouldn't have caught me like this 30 years ago.
No, me neither.
I'll be sleeping in.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Good stuff. Okay, so some familiar names. Excellent. And well, Paul, we've a very global audience, so we've people joining from all over the place. So we've all sorts of time zones.
Okay.
So we'll have people who are, it's afternoon or it's early morning, and some people maybe it's nighttime already. Or
okay. Welcome everybody from wherever you are. Welcome to day one. Let's go.
Absolutely. Paul, where are you at the moment, actually?
Where I was just going to say, if you've got people from all over the world, I'm actually in a place called Pokhara, which is in Nepal.
Wow.
And I'm actually heading back to India next week. Nepal, the first time I've been, beautiful place. And over and above the beauty of the place, the people are just so friendly. In fact, do you know what, Thomas? They remind me of Irish people.
Really?
Just really friendly. Everyone is so friendly. I haven't met any Nepalese people that are unfriendly. They're all wonderful. Never been in a country like this at all, except for Ireland.
Wow. Okay, worth a visit then. And
sure.
What time is it there, Paul?
At the moment, it is 10 to 3 in the afternoon.
Okay.
Yeah,
so it's 11 a.m. where I am. I'm in the north of Spain. 10 a.m. UK time. So okay, great. What I will do, Paul, actually, I'm going to turn on my camera, and I think what needs to happen is, let me see, can I do that? Nope, I think you need to make me host temporarily.
Okay.
So if you hover over my panel, I think in the three dots up top right, if you click on that, there should be a way to make me host.
Yeah, bear with me 1 second. So attendee view. So 3 dots here. I've got on the top right, Thomas, I've got attendee view, I've got my view, but I haven't got 3 dots on top right. I've got sort of 9 dots with view. On the bottom right, I've got 3 dots, but those are the social media SM options.
So I think it's if you hover over my image, you should have these 2 blue buttons appear.
Yeah,
mute and then the 3 dots.
Okay, so I'll make you host.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah,
there you go.
That's it. Excellent. So now I should be able to turn on my camera. Let me see. There we go. Excellent. Okay, great. So what I will do, Paul, is I'm going to talk for about 10 minutes about the different course options that exist that Viva has for this MCS for November 2022. And then I'll stop talking and I'll hand back over to Paul, and he's going to talk you through the first half or so, Paul, right, of the pre-scene document. Excellent. Great stuff. There's today's session, I think, will last for about two hours, and there will be a break at the midpoint. So there will be a 5-10 minute break at about the hour mark. There will be time for questions with Paul at the end of the 2-hour session. So don't worry, there will be time to clarify your doubts. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to share the PowerPoint that I have. Paul, you might just let me know if you can see it when I share it. That would be appreciated.
Yeah, I see that. Okay, that's fine.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, so I'm going to just talk through the course options that Viva has for the MCS for November 2022. Okay, so some of you may be familiar with Viva, some of you may not be familiar with Viva. We've been around for almost 6 years now, and in that time we have covered CIMA exclusively. We've served I think about 9,000 students in that time. We've analyzed about 60 case studies since our inception for both the MCS, the OCS and the SCS. We've had prize-winning students in that time. We've had all sorts of students based in all in different parts of the world. People who have maybe struggled with the case study, others who are doing very, very well and win prizes, etc. People who are very challenging local circumstances, people who are working full time, supporting families, etc. So all sorts of students in that time. Okay, our recent satisfaction ratings have been very, very high. We're very proud of that. I would encourage you to go along to Trustpilot and check out the reviews the students have been leaving there. We focused exclusively on CIMA for the last 5 years. I think that will change in the next few months, but until now we've been only CIMA. So all of our focus has gone into that, and the case study is our specialty, really. We were born online as a result of being a remote business, an online business only. It means that we have cost savings that we pass on to our students in the form of a lower price. In 2020, we won CIMA's Global Pass Rate Excellence Award. We were very proud of that. That basically means that students coming onto our courses exceeded global pass rate averages. And we were one of 6 tuition providers to win that award in 2020. So there are basically 2 excellent options that I'm going to talk about today to unlock the rest of the MCS course. I say the rest of the MCS course because this first session is free. It's open to all. Okay, so we're putting this on for all MCS students. We're going to send you out the replay afterwards. Feel free to share that with anyone who you feel would benefit. If you want to participate in the remainder of this course, there are 2 great ways to do that. Okay, you need to pay though for both options, and I'll talk about what's included in both of these options. So first of all, we've got our all access membership, which is a subscription, okay, a 12-month subscription. And basically what it does is it gives you access to all 12 of our standard CIMA courses for 365 days from the point of purchase. So it gives you access to the MCS course, but also it gives you access to the E2 course, the F2 course, the P2 course, the entire strategic level, which is E3, F3, P3, and the SCS, and you also get the operational level included. So that's 365 days of access to all 12 of our CIMA courses. You've also got the MCS Elite course, which is a different thing, okay, which it gives you access to just one course, which is the MCS course. However, it is an advanced MCS course. It's an elite MCS course, so very, very in-depth. The All Access membership, it gives you access to the standard MCS course, okay, as well as the 11 other CIMA courses that we have there. So if we focus on just the MCS part of that offer, you would get 7 live MCS webinars based on the November 2022 case. With the MCS Elite course, you also get access to those 7 live MCS webinars for November 2022. With All Access, you get access to 5 MCS mock exams with model solutions for the November 2022 pre-CIM. However, there is no marking included. The difference with the MCS Elite course is that you get access to those same 5 mock exams with the model solutions, but crucially, you get marking included as well. So you're getting personalized feedback from your tutor for those 5 mocks. And some of the additional elements here, MCS Elite course, we've got 6 additional live workshop sessions with Paul, your tutor. They're 2 hours each. They're highly interactive sessions, very exam focused, where Paul will talk you through mock debriefs and best practices on the day of the exam. You also get access with the MCS Elite course to a private community where Paul will be active. So there's a lot of back and forth between Paul and your fellow students there too. And crucially, with the MCS Elite course, you also get a pass guarantee. So if you fail the exam in November 2022, and there is no reason why you should if you go through these courses and do all of the work involved. But if you fail, you have the assurance that you can repeat the course for free in February 2023 if you need to repeat. Okay, so both great options. The All Access membership is great, we think, for independent learners who want to complete multiple exams in a 12-month period. So maybe you're thinking, I'm going to do the MCS, then I'm going to go straight into the strategic level, do the E3, F3, P3, get through the SCS in the next 12 months. All Access is a great option for students who are, they want to work through the stuff, the content themselves. They're confident they can do that themselves. And there's this big bank of on-demand material there to support them. The MCS Elite course is great for students who are looking for a best-in-class MCS course. So maybe you're having difficulty with the MCS. Maybe you've taken it, you've failed it before, or maybe you're looking to score a really high mark on this exam and you're looking for the best course that you can find. And we think it's an excellent option if that's your aim. Okay, so they're the high-level differences between these two purchase options. Let's go into a little bit more detail. So as I said, with the All Access membership, you get the MCS standard course, as well as those 11 other CIMA standard courses. So what's covered off in the standard course? You've got these foundational materials that you see on the left, where you do a review of E2, F2, and P2. So that reminds you of the main theories included in each of those subjects and talks you through those. There's a series of videos on preparing for the case, what your role is, what's expected from the examiner, etc. The exam day strategy series of videos there talks you through what you do on the day of the exam. How do you manage your time? What are the errors to avoid, etc. And then there is a series of videos on good answer versus bad answer. So that's where we actually take a good model answer and tell you why it's good, and we compare it to a not so good answer and talk through the reasons why it is not such a great answer. So very, very practical. The middle segment there are the live webinars that Paul will be doing with you. Okay, so today is the first one, 1st of October. It's that first half of the pre-scene analysis. Okay, and all of these live sessions will be recorded and put up on the website so that you can view the recordings the day after. Okay, and they'll be there for the next few months. So we've got the pre-scene analysis part 1 today. There's an industry analysis with Paul tomorrow. Then the day after, the second half of the pre-scene is covered. Then there is a series of webinars on E2 applied, F2 applied, and P2 applied. These are possibly the most important sessions, because we take the most important theories from E2, P2, and F2, and we remind you of what they entail. Then we talk about where they appear in this pre-scene, and we talk about likely exam scenarios and how you would actually answer those. Okay, highly practical. Then we tie things up on the webinar front with a key issues webinar on the 4th of November. So that is where Paul will take the top 10 most important issues, review them, and talk about how they might go up on the day of the exam and what theories you could use to answer those. Okay, so all of those live webinar events are recorded and put up on the website. So only that first one, today's session, is free. The rest are need to be unlocked. They need to be paid for via one of these purchase options, All Access or the MCS Elite course. On the right-hand side, then you've got the mock exams. So there are 5 mock exams. They're based on this pre-scene. They all have model solutions, okay? And 4 of these mock exams are already up on the website, okay? The 5th one is coming, I think, on Monday. And the model solutions will be released one by one from next week, okay? So very, very important, the mock exams. So that's the high-level overview of the standard course included in All Access membership, included as part of the MCS Elite course too. If we're talking about the additional MCS Elite course elements, they would be as follows. So on the left-hand side there, you've got these 2-hour workshop events with Paul, okay? So you've got 6 of these 2 hours long each, highly interactive sessions. Okay, so there's going to be a lot of back and forth with your fellow students and with Paul on these sessions. So the first session, the 8th of October, will involve Paul giving you a detailed overview of the exam, the marking process, what the examiner is looking for, etc. The following 4 workshops will be based on the mock exams that you've sat. Okay, so you'll you'll sit the mock exam, and then Paul will follow up with a debrief session for each of those mocks. Okay, so there he'll talk you through the model solution, why it's a good answer, and talk you through the questions in detail and where you were getting stuck, etc. So really, really useful. Then there's a final workshop session on the 12th of November where you will talk about final recommendations and final tips, etc. ahead of your exam. On the right there, you've just got a screenshot of a marking report. So this is a crucial part of the elite course, because with the elite course, all 5 mock exams come with marking included. So you get personalized feedback, what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, where you're going well, where you're not. You get this high-level overview with a score and a breakdown according to the different core activities and the different objective test subjects, so you can really see where you're good and where you're bad and what you need to review. Okay, there are also subsequent pages here that are not displayed here that go into great detail, where you've got tutor comments, etc. on each section of your mock exam. So this is a really useful part of the elite course. Okay, the marking. Another big feature with the elite course is a very active private community. So you'll be set up with access to this community where you will interact with your tutor and your fellow students. So this is where, in an informal way, you'll be able to go beyond the webinars and the workshops and the mock exams to discuss things in a more informal manner. You'll have a back and forth with your tutor and your fellow students here. So typical things here, people will be posting useful articles, and they will be clarifying doubts about theory, etc., about the mock exams. You can see some snippets here from a recent course that we ran. So this is a really useful feature too. This is the community. Okay, so all in all, we think that results in a really complete course. Okay, the MCS Elite course has all of these elements. It's got coaching, so a lot of interaction, as I say, with your tutor via the private community, by email, etc. There are in total 26 hours of live webinars and workshops, so that's really, really complete. You also have access to a lot of on-demand content that sits on the website. You have the 5 mock exams with model solutions, plus marking. And marking, we find, is a real differentiator. It can really make the difference between a pass and a fail. And you have access to fellow students on the community as well. Okay. So next steps. If you're interested in the MCS Elite course, the most complete MCS option, you can book your place by paying a £99 deposit now. And then there is a remaining fee of £500. So the total cost of the course is £599. What we do is we allow you to spread that out. So you pay a £99 deposit now, and then in 1 month time, you start paying off the remaining £500. And what you do is you pay that remaining balance of £500 over 5 months. So you pay the £99 today, then in October, you've got a £100 installment to pay. In November, you've got another £100 installment to pay. In December, another £100. In January of 2023, another £100. And then in February, you pay the final installment. So that allows you to spread the costs out. So I'll put the link for the £99 deposit into the chat box in a minute. But basically, when you pay this, you'll get access to all of the registration links, the workshop links, the webinar links, the link to the private community, etc. And there will be a terms and conditions sheet sent out for signature. If you have any doubts, you can email us at info@vivatuition.com. Okay, so just important to mention that while Paul is absolutely the the case study expert. He's the expert on the content. If you have any questions about how much courses cost, when certain classes, etc., take place, any of these administrative doubts, please drop us an email at info@vivatuition.com. Paul isn't going to be able to assist you with that, but we certainly will if you drop us an email at info@vivatuition.com. Okay. The other option I mentioned, the all access membership. This is great, as I said, for students who just want to work away themselves. They want to have access to a ton of on-demand content, a big library of content on the website. They're thinking of doing multiple exams over the course of 12 months. This is an absolutely great option. It's a high value option. So the usual price for this is £399. We're dropping this to £299 for the next 48 hours for attendees of this webinar. Okay. So first step, register for this webinar for free. That's done. So that's checked off. The second step, you can purchase all access at a discount for the next 48 hours. We will send out the discounted link in an hour or two, and you'll receive an email with all of the webinar sessions and access to the mock exams, etc., on the website. Okay. Again, if you have any doubts about all access membership, please email us at info@vivatuition.com. Okay. So I'll just make time for a couple of questions now, and then I'm going to hand over to Paul. Okay. So I don't know actually if the chat, it is. So you can use the chat functionality to pop your questions in, or the Q&A. So I'm just taking a look at the Q&A. Okay. No questions yet on the courses. Okay. So what I'll do, Paul, is I'm going to hand over to you now. I'm going to stop sharing. So I need to make you host again, because if I log out, then I'll close down the entire recording. That would be a disaster. Okay.
As long as the students wouldn't prefer that. They haven't heard what I've got to say yet. They haven't heard maybe they won't actually. Let's hope not.
Okay. Let me see. Okay. So I hope that was clear. Any questions, info@vivatuition.com. Okay. I'll post those links in a few minutes. Okay. And I'll also send an email out after, so you have access to all of those links. So Paul, what I'll do, yeah.
Just a few questions coming in via the chat just now. Thomas, I don't know if these are relevant, just on the chat.
I see.
Quite a few in there. Some of which I could deal with, but maybe some I can't.
Are there classes during the week? Flor asks. Yes, there are some sessions during the week. I think most of the sessions fall at the weekend, but there are some midweek sessions. They tend to be outside UK working hours. Okay. Now we know that doesn't suit everyone. This is why we record all of the sessions. Okay. So all of the sessions are recorded, the webinars, the workshops, everything, and they're put up on the website the day after. So if you miss a session, you can get it after. And yes, absolutely. You know, it's a very in-depth course. It covers theory, exam theory, the pre-scene is covered, the real life industry, etc. It's very complete. Are these full 3-hour mocks with all 4 questions? Yes, they are. Every mock is 3 hours long and has 4 sections with 2 subtasks. Okay, just like the real exam. Carl asks, I couldn't see the mock workshops links added on my account. Is this something that will be added later on? So Carl, the workshop links are accessible via the community. So you should have received an email with a link to join the community. And in the community, you will see a section there for the workshop links. If you don't see that, Carl, please send us an email at info@vivatuition.com and we'll double check it. Is the reading material provided? Yes, there are extensive notes uploaded to the website as well. Paul is using an annotated pre-scene today. that will be given to Viva customers. Okay, so that will not be made available for free to all attendees of the webinar today. It will only be made available to Viva customers, the annotated pre-scene. Okay, but there are extensive notes right across the course, and they will be made available to all Viva customers. Is there a separate course for the gateway exam? So it's the same course for the gateway exam, okay, the same pre-scene. I can't see any reading material for P2, E2, and F2 to go through for preparation. So, Mohammed, because the webinars have not been done yet for the P2, E2, and F2 applied sessions, the PowerPoints have not been uploaded yet. But when we do those sessions, the PowerPoints will be uploaded to the website. There will be extensive notes available to you. So, right. Viva usually takes about a month to reply to emails sent. Okay, well, I would disagree with that. But it could be that you sent an email that maybe that went to spam or that was just missed. Okay, so please send an email to info@vivatuition.com and I guarantee you we'll get back to you within the day. Alice, will we go through the old exams as well during the elite course? So I suppose you're referring to past CIMA exams. No, not really. No. We focus everything really on the current pre-scene, which is not to say that we're not drawing on stuff that happened in previous exams, because that actually informs the mock exams that we're writing for this window. So CIMA reuses the same theories again and again, and you see the same kinds of themes pop up. So we definitely draw on that, but everything is based on this current pre-scene.
I would just add to that as well, Thomas, in relation to Alice's point. Two things, Alice, that I think are important there. One's serious and one's quite funny. Let me tell you the serious one first. I would say, in my experience, Alice, one thing that I haven't seen enough of with MCS students is reference to the post-exam guides. In other words, reference to the old exams themselves. There's only so much that tuition companies, and I've worked for many of them in the CIMA area, can do based on the pre-scene. There's so many resources. And I always encourage students to take a good, clear look at the post-exam guides. I believe, but correct me, Thomas, if I'm wrong, I believe that the latest guide available as at today is the one before the May-August sitting. I believe it's November 21, February 22. I'd advise every student on this call, whether or not you're going to sign up with us or not, take a look at those guides, because this is the horse's mouth, if you will, Thomas, isn't it? This is information from what I used to call, when I did professional exams, the enemy. The enemy is giving us information. And yet students, every time, Thomas, I ask students in any class for the last 12 years of lecturing, oh, do you look at the post-exam guides? Do you look at the... No, I don't. That's crazy. The second thing, Alice, in relation to your point about old exams, and also just up top when Thomas answered a question about mock exams, is that I've only recently started working with Viva, and I went through their mock exam writing process. So in other words, to write mock exams. Now, I haven't written mock exams for probably 6 or 7 years, but I thought I was quite good. But when I got the feedback back from the mock exam team at Viva, I got a lot of information about how I should change my approach to writing the mock exams. So my point is this, is that I think that the Viva mock exams, the process of writing them, ties in not only the old exams, but the process is very stringent. So I would class myself as a good mock writer, but it was very challenging for me to write a mock exam that was acceptable for Viva. So my point is, Alice, twofold. Number one, get onto the mock exam guides for sure, or past exam guides. And number two, in relation to your colleague up top about the mock exams and quality, etc. Certainly Viva has one of the best reputations within the CIMA sphere for writing mock exams. Over to you, Thomas.
Great points. I think, Paul, the post-exam report crucial. And I should mention that the post-exam reports we pay a lot of attention to, and they're cooked into many of the videos that you will find in the foundational materials section that I referred to earlier on. So, the good answer, bad answer, the exam day strategy, etc. All of that is drawing on the post-exam reports. What we do there is we've gone through all of those post-exam reports. What we see is the same themes coming up again and again and again.
Yeah.
We put those into various webinar sessions that we did, and they're up there as foundational materials. So do go through them.
Yeah, and it goes back to the classic book, Thomas, doesn't it? The Art of War. Sun Tzu. If you're facing a challenge, and these CIMA exams, they're challenging, particularly the case studies. You're facing a challenge. Know your enemy. Know your enemy. It's simple. This is common sense. Common sense.
Absolutely. Okay, so just a couple more questions, and I'm gonna hand over to Paul. So there's one there. How long does it take to receive feedback from a mock exam? So typically we get the mocks corrected and back to you within 72 hours. Okay, so within 3 days. And I think that's it. So Paul, I'm going to hand over to you now.
Okay.
I'm going to mute myself. I'll be keeping an eye on the chat. So there we go. Paul, if you want to display your screen, I'll let you know if I see it. Okay, I need to make you host.
Yeah, I'll just check that. I'm going to start. I just have a very, very short intro that I'm going to do, Thomas, to very, very briefly introduce myself, but also to introduce a little bit of advice, okay, for the students.
Good. I can see that.
You can see that, okay. So I will screen share, but I'll keep it on the first page. That's our very first page, just below content. So I'm all good to go, Thomas. I'm all good to go.
Best of luck, Paul.
Great. Cheers. Okay, everybody. Listen, thanks for joining me, and thanks for all the questions there. The focus, as Thomas has said, is about the pre-scene, and indeed, roughly speaking, the first part of that. So I will get onto that just in a moment, but I want to share something with you. This will be, I guess, your first introduction to me. I want to share a story, just a very brief story with you. And this story is, for me, it's central to your success. It's central to your success in this exam, whether or not you sign up with us here at Viva Tuition, and I hope you will, but even if you don't, for the next few minutes, just listen very, very carefully to me, okay? Now, this story concerns a guy called Simon. Yeah, an MCS student who came to me around about 5 years ago, around about 2017. I can't remember exactly. I think it was possibly just before the February sitting of the MCS exam. Now, I had known this student a couple of years previous because I taught him CIMA E1 in Belfast in a company called the Richard Clark Academy. But when he got in contact with me, he was really, really down in the dumps because he had failed the MCS exam twice, okay? And the second time his mark had gone down, and it was a pretty bad mark, a very bad mark, but I can't remember what it was. So he contacted me to ask me for advice. This is a two-time MCS resitter that I hadn't spoken to for a year or two. I can't recall exactly. Okay. And in the conversation that we had, he talked about his experience over those two failing sittings and indeed his approach. And very often, in fact, most of the time, when I come into contact with students that have had the misfortune to fail the MCS exam, I have a little trick that I play on them, yeah? And this trick is to play dumb, yeah? To play dumb. So what I do is I start asking them questions about their approach that I already know the answers to, okay? for good reason. Now, for anybody who hasn't had a resit in the MCS exam, as this is your first attempt, this story is still very, very important to your success on exam day and results in January. It's extremely important, resitting or not. So what I did was, with Simon, that is his name, by the way, and I'll tell you how you might find out a little bit more about Simon in due course. Wait for a moment. I started to ask him questions such as, okay, what was your approach to the pre-CIMA? How did you research the industry? How much time did you spend researching the industry? Did you do what we would call a strategic analysis on the particular case study company? How many mock exams did you do? Were those mock exams done to time? Did you get those mock exams marked by an expert marker? Did you review the mock exam solutions really, really carefully, probably in about half the time it took you to do the exam? Yeah, I said it, half the time, not 5 minutes like this, yeah, an hour and a half. Did you follow through in relation to the expert marker's guidance from the first mock to the second mock, et cetera, and really learn from your experiences? So those are the sorts of questions that I asked him in my slightly dumb sort of manner when I knew the answers. You may be sitting there wherever you are in the world thinking, well, how did you know the answers? I can tell you how I know the answers to the questions, because I've dealt with hundreds and hundreds of research students and broadly thousands of students, CIMA, ACCA, et cetera. So, you know, it's not that I'm particularly smart, is that the responses from underperforming students tend to be the same, always. So I know what they're going to say before they say it. So once he had addressed the various questions and we've had a little bit of a chit chat and I poked him a little bit, I said, well, I can tell you a couple of things, Simon. The first one is that in relation to these two misfortunes, these two failures, they're not down to you personally. This is not personal, yeah? The F word in relation to this particular area, if you have one in your mind, is feedback, okay? So if there's anyone on the call who's had the misfortune of 1 or 2 fails at the MCS, or if there's a student whose first time's worried about whether or not you can pass, I can tell you that any MCS student since February 2015, when this exam was introduced, who's had that F word on their mind on results day, yeah, that F word is none other than feedback. Feedback from CIMA, feedback from your marker, feedback from the examiner on your approach. And indeed for Simon, a real person, the story gets better. I wonder, can you guess how much better the story gets, okay? For Simon, his approach was all over the place. Yeah. Now, what do I mean by that? I'm not going to dwell on this because we've got to move on to the pre-CIMA. Number one, he spent quite a lot of his time researching the industry, okay? Wasting time on becoming an industry expert. If you look at the post-exam guides, as I said to your colleague Alice a few moments ago, the examiner at MCS level says specifically and repeatedly, you do not have to be an industry expert to pass this exam. And on top of that, you will not get massive extra marks, if any, for pure industry knowledge. The pre-CIMA document, and indeed the information relating to the industry, is there to provide context. That's all. Yeah, this is a case study exam. This isn't a test on the industry. This is a test on, broadly speaking, across all the levels, really your skills in the workplace. This is a role play exam, okay? Now, getting back to Simon, too much industry research, yeah? Mock exams, did he do any? No, he didn't, but he did buy some. and he read them. He read the questions and he read the solutions. Did he get them marked? No, he didn't. So all of the basic points that Hugh and Thomas and myself and all the team at Learn Signal, or indeed at Viva Tuition, will bang on about, students who fail this exam ignore the basics. So in summary, what are the basics and what did Simon do? Because the next time he sat the exam, he passed. What did he do? Well, the reverse of what I just said. In other words, a focus on understanding the context in which the company exists, i.e. the pre-scene, being aware of the key points in the pre-scene rather than having to figure them out or check them on the day. You know, understanding basically the business model, and then putting those areas along with your content knowledge into practice with good quality mock exams, getting them done to time under exam conditions, getting them marked and getting the feedback from them, and then learning from failure. A bit like learning how to ride a bike. If you remember, you kept falling off, but you wanted to ride that bike. You kept on getting back up, even though you had a bloody head, bloody nose, etc., etc. So let's cut a long story short. What happened with Simon? We changed his approach. We didn't change him. Yeah. Simon did the MCS exam and won first place in Ireland in the subsequent sitting. Joint first place, actually. 2 people. I think he got something like, I don't know, I can't remember exactly, 107, 108, something like that. So we had a 2-time resitter go to being a prize winner. Yeah, his name is Simon Jenkinson, if you want to check him out, based in Northern Ireland, and he won't mind me giving you that information. So what's my point? Is it something to do with me? No, it isn't, because I didn't do the exam. Is it something to do with Simon and his approach? Yes, it is. Okay. And really, at the end of my intro here, what I'm trying to impress upon you, whether or not you're going to sign up with Viva or not, and I hope that you will, yeah, what I'm trying to press on you is you have 2 choices going forward to November or February. Number 1 is the best choice and the best way forward. And number 2 is the reverse. A road towards failure. If you don't cover your bases in terms of the essential areas of a course, i.e. good quality content, good quality tuition, mock exams, marking, yeah, an understanding of what this exam is about, which is basically a role play skills test. It's not a retest of the 3 subjects per se. You need to have a modicum of knowledge, okay? But you need to practice, practice, practice. So if you use your common sense and indeed listen to me, Hugh, and indeed the team here, and tick the boxes, i.e. do exactly what we tell you to do, then I would say your chances of passing this exam are extremely high, because passing the MCS exam, if you do all of the right things, is actually fairly straightforward. It is, and that's no disrespect to research students, because for me, research students do too much of the wrong things and not enough of the right things. So make an understanding of the pre-scene, a modicum of knowledge in relation to the 3 subjects, mock exams, and practice, 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 learning from failure, the core of your work. If you're finding yourself on Google a lot, becoming an expert in the industry, be very, very careful, because your chances of success are low. Okay, so that's my intro. Thanks for sticking with me and listening to me. I do hope that you take what I've said in the last 5 minutes on board. That's the right way, that's the wrong way. The right way involves hard work, and in particular, mock exams. Okay, so let's kick off, everybody, on this pre-scene analysis. We're going to go ballpark halfway through on this particular day today for the next hour, hour and a half, or thereabouts. What you'll find in front of you, yeah, indeed on my screen, is an annotated pre-scene. Now, there are a lot of annotations here. I'm going to touch on the ones that I think are most relevant within the timescale that we have available. And I'm going to try and build in my knowledge of topics that have appeared in past MCS exams. I have some notes to my side here. So in essence, we're going to flow from page to page, but I'm probably not going to deal with every single point that you see on screen. You will get a copy of this annotated pre-scene, so you'll be able to run through many of the points yourself. I'm going to focus in on what I think is most important. Okay, so let's start off. I'm hoping that you can see my screen all okay. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to move my PC. I've just moved into a new location. Getting the light right in here has been a little bit tricky. Yeah, I've been trying for the last couple of hours, but it's just not working. So if I am a little bit sort of dark for you, my apologies. It's certainly not my tan, because I haven't been outside because of work pressures. So if I'm a little bit dark, my apologies. For next time round, I'll try to get the lighting a little bit better. Okay, so let's start off. We're on page 1. We know that we have basically a toy retailer here. Now, straight off the bat, yeah, one key point to refer to, and I'm going to try to refer to it as often as possible, is really within an MCS pre-scene, there will be things that are very important. There'll be things that are not so important at all. So one just piece of advice, you can take it or leave it, don't fixate, yeah? Don't fixate with any particular area of the pre-scene. Just get a broad understanding of the whole pre-scene. And linked into that, one habit that I've seen with students at OCS, MCS, and MCS level is to spend a lot of time trying to find hints, yeah, and clues as to what's coming up on their variant, yeah, on their variant of their exam. It's never going to happen, okay? It's not going to happen. It's a waste of time. The pre-scene is about context, okay? So you'd be better advised to buy a lottery ticket if you're going to spend a lot of time saying, that's probably going to come up in my variant. Okay, so what do we have this time around for the MCS exam? We have a very, very successful toy retailer, as we can see, with a fairly straightforward business model. We've basically got a company, 120 retail shops in this country of Wistaria, and their business model is simple, yeah? So buy in from the main manufacturers, the big boys, and indeed the smaller manufacturers, negotiate good prices, operate from retail stores because they're popular, because of parking, because of convenience, because of other facilities at retail stores, and make sure that within each retail store, you have merchandising, yeah? Merchandising at the top of your mind. What does that mean? Merchandising within a retail toy store, or indeed any store, is about presentation. It's about presenting the products in a way that's appealing to consumers, children, and their parents as soon as they walk in that door. And for me, the more I look at this pre-scene, and indeed the more I read about the toy industry, I have 2 kids, but I'm no expert on toys. My girls are early 20s now, but I do recall, that my girls, they made the decisions. They decided where we went to, and they decided what we buy, and they decided how much too. But in essence, I see in terms of this business model with Happy Playz is the key issue for them. The key thing, the key reason for their success, apart from retail outputs, is their expertise in the area of merchandising, yeah, and indeed buying. Those 2 things are why within 30 years, they hold 10% of this market. So outside of the first line, we see that they're a quoted entity, okay? Does that have any relevance to us in terms of possible exam topics? For me, no, it doesn't. Why is that? Because if we look at the management level syllabus, we see that governance or corporate governance from the syllabus change in November 2019 it has been taken out. It's actually moved up into E3. So the fact that this company is a listed entity, yeah, doesn't necessarily mean that we would have a question on the area of corporate governance, because I just don't think that they're going to examine, and indeed they haven't examined that area since this area was removed from the CIMA E2 syllabus. Okay, so we see here that there's a reference to finance, yeah, within sources of finance. Now, outside of the fact that they've obviously raised finance by going to the markets, sources of finance is a popular topic for your MCS examiner. And we know within the E2 area that it's one of the early parts of the syllabus. Let's be familiar with their balance sheet in terms of their capitalization, and indeed also, obviously, the fact that they don't have any debt as such. There are no bank borrowings. There are lease liabilities, both short-term and long-term, but no bank borrowings. So it raises the question of, if they did need finance for something, an acquisition, some sort of investment in equipment, some sort of appraisal situation, what would be their options? And their options are fairly obvious. We're talking about the issue of more capital. We're talking about possibly going to the bank or VC venture capitalists or business angels. So we need to be familiar, yeah, with the upsides and downsides of sources of long-term finance. And then over and above that, we need to be familiar with how new finance affects the balance sheet in some way, shape, or form. If you look to the right here, yeah, we see the effects of the rights issue and possibly convertible bonds on EPS. So let's be familiar with the nuts and bolts of new finance and effect on balance sheet and pluses and minuses of each, okay? Now, right-hand side here, it talks about, the country itself, Westaria. Now, I would say of all of the pre-scenes that I've seen at the MCS level, just about all of them, you're always talking, more often than not, about an affluent society, a developed country, a recognized stock exchange, et cetera, et cetera. So it's very rare that in terms of the environment, there are serious issues like a recession or problems in the economy or inflation or anything else, okay? So the second paragraph is broadly what I would expect. Look over to the right-hand side, yeah? I think this is important. This is reference to pricing, yeah? Now, one key point here, and I've made a note on my sort of written PDF about Porter's generic strategies. Now, we should be reasonably familiar with that model. If we're not, let's look it up. Very, very briefly, we know that what Porter is saying in this whole area of generic strategies, which is certainly linked in to pricing, linked into that area within P2, more of that in a moment. Let's be clear and make a decision as to where we place Happy Playz. What are they under those three main banners? Are they focusing? Yeah. Are they a differentiator? Are they a cost leader? Yeah. For me, I think it's a tricky question. It's not as straightforward as previous MCSs, but for me, even with their fixation on prices and driving price down, they're not a manufacturer or producer, but everything about their buying department says we need the lowest prices possible because we're going to mess around with competitors. Yeah, we're going to mess around with competitors. We see this referenced in the pre-scene, perhaps on a daily, weekly basis. So notwithstanding that point, everything about this business is about differentiation. And I'm referring specifically to the choice of retail stores, the expertise in merchandising, the presentation within the stores, and indeed, over and above that, I guess the expertise of the buying department. They are, for me, a differentiator. So how does that link in to pricing and indeed P2? Well, we should know from our management level studies that in terms of pricing, yeah, in terms of pricing their goods, broadly speaking, they've got two main options, haven't they? They've sort of like got a cost approach or maybe a market approach. So as an example, let's say just off the top of my head, under the area of, let's say, market approach, premium pricing, there's an option. Now, remember, within the management level syllabus, there are many, many different options for pricing. Let's be savvy with them. What does premium pricing mean? It does what it says on the tin. It's about high prices, high margin. Does that sound like Happy Playz with all that messing around that they do with suppliers in terms of driving the price down? Doesn't sound like them at all. What are the options? What are the options? Let's look it up. Down into the fourth paragraph there, you're given your role within this context of this imaginary country, imaginary company, imaginary environment. Now, key point here, a financial manager, and I love what Learn Signal have done here in terms of detailing the role. Okay, this is Viva's work rather than Learn Signals, of course. There's the role, there's the basic role of any financial manager. Now, this role thing is important. You know, when we look at at what makes up a financial manager role, it's varied and it's very, very comprehensive. Okay, that's one side to it. The other side is something linked to a mistake that I see students making in the MCS exam regularly, particularly underperforming students. And the mistake is this, and I've referenced it already. This exam is about you, yeah, wherever you are in the world, being employed by a company. So when you're in the exam and you're answering those tasks, 4 tasks, normally a 50-50 split on each task, but it doesn't have to be, yeah? When you're answering those tasks, answer them from the perspective of an employee of Happy Playz, not some other person. We can't be talking about they. In this paragraph, it has said specifically, you are, not they are, not that person sitting across from you, it's you. So answer the questions from the perspective of we at Happy Playz. Now, why is that important? I think the more that you absorb this role from today, the more that you absorb the fact that you are a financial manager, the easier it is for information to come in from Viva, from myself, from your research. In essence, what I'm sort of talking about is, it's a little bit like, if you will, I don't know if you're familiar with method acting, yeah? Now, method acting, very briefly, simply means when actors prepare for a role, they actually live it, yeah? So when you think about great actors like Robert De Niro, if you've heard of him, or Al Pacino, you know, they live this role prior to actually going on set and actually delivering the role. I think one method of approaching passing the MCS is to live the role, is to be the financial manager. Start thinking like the financial manager of this entity, because that's what they've said that you are, okay? Let's move on. Now, this second page, I have said that I'm going to address as many areas within the pre-scene annotations as I can. Now, this next one here, there's only really a couple of points on this page that I want to address. What we see here is very, very detailed information, yeah, about the industry itself within this imaginary country of Wistaria. Let me just make this slightly smaller for you so that you can actually see it. I'm hoping that you can still read. Bear with me 1 second. I'm hoping you can still read everything on there, apart from the fact that obviously I've got a camera which I'll get rid of now. Okay, so this is a very, very comprehensive set of pages on this industry. Certainly I've seen this type of thing before, but my God, the CIMA have gone to town on this industry this time around, which is good in one way and a little bit tricksy-dixy in another, okay? Let me explain. Well, let me start by explaining 1 or 2 things that I think is relevant, okay? The first thing is,
that when we think about the toy industry, left-hand side there's a reference to value. In other words, how, I guess, players within the toy industry, like Happy Playz, like Gleetill, how they create value and indeed, broadly speaking, distribute value out to stakeholders, okay? Now, one key point here for me is that this area of value, please do refer to the, I think it's page 16 of this pre-scene where they have the CIMA sort of value diagram, okay? Do have a good read, a little bit like a diamond. Have a good read about that, because what it talks about, and we will deal with this on Monday in pre-scene part 2, what it talks about is really how does a business like this go from basically nothing to chopping up value that it's created and sort of distributing it out in many, many different forms. Please do note that this area of value, or indeed the creation of value, was only brought in November 2019, okay, on the change of syllabus. So it's an important area for CIMA, it's an important area for you. Understand what it means, and bear in mind, when we talk about the creation of value, yeah, within a MCS context, we are not talking about profit. We are not talking about the creation of profit. Value, yeah, is different to profit. So let's have a think as we run through the course over the next few weeks as to, well, what are the many ways, because there's more than one way to create value, that Happy Playz create this value, okay? Now, in this particular area, this particular page, for me, there's not a tremendous amount apart from a great deal of background into the various types of toys or forms of toys that are available to purchase within this imaginary market. So I'm not going to dwell on this page 2 too much at all. I'm going to move on to a much more important page for me, which is page 3. Okay, and note that by the end of this particular webinar, I would hope that you've made a few notes here and there, particularly when I refer to management level subjects, okay, and topics that could be examined on the day. Let's look at top left first, okay? And here we talk about one of the areas, and safety, okay? Now, certainly if I was to pick, based on my review of this pre-scene, 5 areas that would be relevant that tie into the management level syllabus, one of them would have to be health and safety and or risk stroke reputation, okay? Now, when we think of health and safety, we probably think of CIMA E2 and the basic sort of subject matter in there about the employer versus the employee. I'm talking about something that's slightly different. I'm talking about the fact that clearly within this business model, most of the products that they sell will be sold to young children. Yeah, probably 0 to 5 or thereabout, most of them, or certainly 0 to 10. Okay, that creates a major problem for them, potentially, if anything goes wrong. I was looking the other day at stats on product recalls and problems associated with product recalls in the US. And according to the stats that I saw is, you know, the 2 big things, the 2 big worries and the 2 big historic instances, if you will, that are linked to product recall, believe it or not, are choking, yeah, and death. Yeah, choking and death. This was in the US, but nonetheless, this is pretty serious, yeah? Now, what we've got to be savvy with, for me, is risk. And when we think about risk, we clearly think about P2, and we think about risk mapping. We think about TARA. We think about that framework that really sort of considers the whole area of probability, the probability of the risk occurring, and indeed the impact. So it's not beyond the realms of imagination for the examiner to present us with possibly some scenarios and possibly ask us to apply the TARA framework. Okay. Outside of that, let's remember that within the management level syllabus, again, I'm just referring at the moment to the left-hand side, where this note refers to, in particular, legal and reputational risk of a potential accident, a potential problem, a child's choking, a child dying, etc. The big emphasis within P2 is reputation. That's the big emphasis. So when we think about corporate social responsibility, again, a popular topic across all case study exams, the big thing at the management level syllabus and what he would target in the first instance, I think, is something to do with reputation and indeed public interest. I mean, we're familiar with what corporate social responsibility means. We know that all employers have a responsibility to their customers, to their competition, to the local community, to the environment. Let's be familiar with the definition of CSR and what the responsibilities of a company like Happy Playz is. Okay, just moving down the page, linked into reputation and indeed responsibilities. One big topic area for us, and indeed, if you look online, this area of electronic games. And on the left-hand side, we talk there about individual parents' reluctance, to sort of to purchase electronic games, or if you will, video games. Now, I don't know if you were aware, but there are a number of rehabilitation centers or rehab centers for individuals, whether they're children or not, who are addicted. In fact, there's a syndrome called VGA, video game addiction. Okay, so this whole area, again, as referred to up top, of the responsibility of a company like Happy Playz to their consumers, to the kids that buy their toys, is an absolute hot topic. And it ties in with another key area for CIMA, which is ethics and ethical behavior. And let's remember that if you look back on most case study exams, most MCS exams, possibly every other exam, you'll see reference in one of the variants, if not 2 or 3 of the variants, to ethical situations or ethical dilemmas. Okay, the easiest way for CIMA to bring in one of their favorite topics, ethics, into exam is simply to present you with an ethical dilemma in some way. Now, that may refer to possibly a product that's gone wrong or responsibility they have, but it could be something else. Taking a tangent, it could be that, let's say the FD, for example, has asked you as the financial manager to do something in relation to a set of accounts or a report that's clearly unethical. So really what we're talking about here is the presentation within the MCS exam of an ethical dilemma. And the way to approach dealing with ethical dilemmas is clearly the set of steps. So again, let's make a note of that. How to deal with ethical dilemmas, whether or not they're product related or whether or not it's just related to a scenario that is presented to you. Okay. So moving down the page here, if we look at the left-hand side, right, just down at the bottom, okay, there's reference to E2 here, bottom left, and this area of negotiation. In other words, we're really talking about the dynamic within their sort of business model, where, excuse me, their buyers, for example, are required to negotiate with large popular toy manufacturers and indeed other perhaps less popular toy manufacturers and indeed the manufacturers of bikes and video games. So again, taking it back to past papers, what would be a topic that would probably be in my top 20 most examined MCS topics? Negotiation. Negotiation without fail. Now, from your studies of E2, there's really only two main areas, regardless of whether or not we're talking about Happy Playz buying department negotiating with the supplier, or you as the financial manager having to be involved to negotiate with another department. Regardless, there's only two ways that the examiner comes at this topic. And number one is the most obvious, which is the simple stages of negotiation, i.e. opening, etc., the 4 stages. The second side of negotiation that he tends to play with is, I guess, the characteristics, of successful negotiators. And again, you'll see this detailed within our course material, this idea that successful negotiators have some qualities. For example, they listen, they don't produce counter arguments, they don't argue, etc., etc., etc. We're trying to move towards a win-win. Yeah? Okay, make a note of that one. Just bottom left-hand side here, there's a reference here to licensing, and probably I need to clarify this. In other words, IFRS 15 in terms of recognition of revenue. Now, for me, this section, page 4 of the pre-scene, is about the manufacturers. And indeed, this particular section, which sort of is relevant to infant and preschool. Now, if they're licensed toys, in other words, let's say licensed in relation to some popular film, then it would be the manufacturer that would deal with the IFRS 15 aspect. In other words, the problematic accounting side rather than Happy Playz. Okay, a couple of points in relation to the right-hand side here, this outdoor sports and toys. Now note that between these two, between infant and preschool, which are the biggest percentage of all toys sold within the Swistarian market, and indeed outdoor and sports toys, which are the 3rd largest. So these are quite chunky if combined. A couple of key points here. Left-hand side here, we're talking about sort of decision-making or possible decision-making in relation to possibly expansion. So again, this brings in a very, very popular topic in the MCS exam surrounding the area of investment appraisal and decision-making. Okay, if we look at this particular type of toy, and indeed several of the others, it's very much seasonal, isn't it? So there's an issue for Happy Playz in terms of trying to predict the market, trying to forecast demand. Now that lends itself nicely to, obviously, investment appraisal and that area within P2. So what sort of things and what sort of questions tend to be asked in this area within the MCS exam? Well, again, it's actually a lot more straightforward than you would think. First things first, we know that in terms of short-term decision-making, we know that NPV, IRR, payback, discounted payback, we know that we have a series of techniques within P2. So how would they be examined within an MCS exam? Do we think that they would be examined to the depth, to the degree that they are in an OT paper? Absolutely not. Okay, well then how? All that we need to know is basically, how do these techniques work? Yeah. And indeed, what are the assumptions underlying each of these techniques? And to be honest with you, you could probably revise that in about 10 or 20 minutes, I would say. You could certainly look at the main areas of NPV, IRR, payback, discounted payback, etc., within about 20 minutes or so, and have a reasonable feel so you could come at an answer. Okay. The other area linked to this is the provision to you of already done calculations for you to analyze. And again, this is where a good, solid, basic knowledge of the content within P2 investment appraisal will come to your aid. One of the things, one of the mistakes that I see students making in relation to the MCS exam is assuming that the MCS case study exam is a retest of everything that was covered within the OT level papers, E2, F2. It is not. Why would CIMA do that? Why would they retest the same content in exactly the same way? They're not doing that. A modicum of knowledge across all the areas and good writing, communication skills, analytical skills is what we need to pass this exam. Okay. Now, moving on to our next page. Yeah. Again, this is an important one. There's several areas here that I want to draw to your attention. Bear with me 1 second. Bear with me. Okay. Now, if you look at the top right and the reference to digital disruption, a couple of things that I want to bring to your attention here. This particular note references this area of IoT and swarm robotics. And when we're talking about vehicles, one of the top sellers, by the way, in this particular market, all that we mean by swarm vehicles is just sort of multiple vehicles, connected robots. Imagine rather than one car, imagine 50 of them, IoT related. Okay, so that's what we mean. But back to the point, the key point here is we have to be aware, based on the changes from the November 19 syllabus, the syllabus last changed in November 2019, where they brought into CIMA E2 a number of areas that related to disruption, that related to businesses, not just in the toy industry, in all industries, having their business models completely disrupted. Yeah. So we've got to be familiar with the terminology, but also we have to be familiar with the constituent elements of the syllabus underneath that banner of digital disruption. So, first things first, I mean, what do we mean by disruption? I'm sure you know, we're talking about technology that basically, my quote here is fundamentally changes. So a typical example outside of the context of the Happy Playz pre-scene might be fintech, yeah? A cryptocurrency. We're talking about anything that completely turns everything on its head, yeah? And if you do any research on the toy industry, yeah, you'll certainly see that there are several things ahead of us that are said to be things that are going to completely turn the toy industry on its head, namely virtual reality and augmented reality. So if I was an MCS student and I was going to do a little bit of research outside of what's on the Viva portal, those are the areas that I think I'd concentrate on. What are people doing? How are they doing it? What's the time scale? And what's going to be the impact upon the toy industry? Because if you read carefully, you'll see that in 20 to 30 years' time, the toy industry is not going to look like it looks today. Okay, so that's the first thing. What is disruptive technology? And let's have some examples of it. Outside of that, a couple of things that I think is important, you'll see them referenced within the E2 syllabus on this area of, okay, digital disruption, so what? And it's what referred to, I think what Kaplan referred to as myths, yeah? Myths associated with digital disruption. The first myth, yeah, the first untruth, indeed, this is what some companies think, is that if they're not involved heavily in disruption right now, in other words, if they haven't disrupted their business right, then they've missed the boat. So that's myth number one. No time is too late to jump. Let's say Happy Playz to jump towards disrupting their business in some way, possibly moving into VR and AR. That's the first myth. It's never too late. The second myth is that, and I've seen this within other industries, is where companies buy into this idea that there is a digital disruption, but treat it as a sort of an admin exercise, rather than treating it as something that can be used to generate new revenue leads. The third myth is relevant to personnel. In other words, it's they actually reference, I think it's, I got this from Kaplan, where they reference the idea of simply appointing some sort of digital guru, like a chief digital officer, and then you're done. everything will be great. You know, disrupting a business is about mindset. It's about embedding this idea of disruption across the board, across your company, across Happy Playz at all levels. It's not just the idea of appointing someone with expertise. So that's the first excuse me, key point. Just a reminder then, certainly within the CIMA E2 syllabus as it stands now, make sure that you have a good grip on all the areas of disruptive technology that have been mentioned within CIMA E2 since the change of the syllabus. Okay, let's move on now. Just bottom right-hand side, you'll see that we have reference in this little table here to what I said up top. In other words, the main areas outside of note bikes and indeed video games. This doesn't refer, this table, this 8 billion market that we have in 2021 does not refer to the 2 extra areas of sales. It simply refers to the toys. Remember, we're talking about toys mainly, video games and bikes. But the video games and bikes, certainly for Happy Playz, that's a much, much smaller range, okay? So one key point before we just go on a quick break here, right-hand side, yeah, it refers to this offering a wide selection, yeah? And certainly when we think about a sort of a SWOT analysis of this business, for me, I'm not so sure how wide the selection is. Because if you look at their main competitor, Gleetil, and indeed there's a lot of information, including financials on Gleetil, their main competitor, Gleetil, in this Wistaria market, there's only 2 players, Happy Playz and Gleetil. Their revenues are basically exactly 50% more, 50% more. Now, their financials are a little bit tricksy-dixy. For example, they published a loss in the last year, but nonetheless, they have revenues of 50% more in this market, okay? Now, how? Well, you'll see in the notes just before their financials that they have bigger stores, they have more stores, and they have a wider range of products, including bikes and video games. That's why they're selling more. Now, it looks, if you look at their financials, as if they've got some issues in terms of efficiency, but nonetheless, they're turning over 50% more than our key player here. One other point is, in terms of one popular topic within the MCS exam, whether or not it comes in or is brought in on the back of P2, an investment for the future, some sort of appraisal, essence of NPV, etc., or possibly an F2 style, perhaps an acquisition of a competitor or a joint arrangement of some kind, or an associate that they've purchased. Regardless of how it comes up, let's make sure that we tie this into strategic techniques. And when I say strategic techniques, I mean, you are a financial manager within this business. You must be savvy with what goes on up top, yeah, possibly not involved in those meetings, but I'm talking about plans for expansion. What's the best model, yeah, to think about when you think about product expansion? There's only really one, Ansoff's matrix, okay? Now, dealing with this right-hand side here, Ansoff's matrix, everybody, is just simply a product expansion matrix. It is not in the management level syllabus. It will be not examined directly, but applying it to this particular pre-scene gives us a feel for possible areas of expansion. So very briefly, what Ansoff's matrix, if applied within this particular business, would suggest to us is the first option is for Magdalena, the CEO, and indeed the executive board, simply to keep doing what they've been doing for the last while. In other words, market penetration, yeah? Penetrate further into the Wistarian market. Just do more of what you have been doing with existing products in your existing market. So toys mainly, bikes, video games, in Wistaria only, that's it. That's the safest,
least risky expansion option for this business? Absolutely. Okay. Number two, what would be the next risky area, or not so risky, certainly not as risky as one or two of the others? Well, the obvious thing for this business and for Magdalena and the board in terms of this, the obvious thing outside of simply penetrating further into the market, gaining market share based on what they've been doing for the last while, is obviously market development. In other words, existing products in a new market. Where would that new market be for a company like Happy Playz? The surrounding countries, similar, I guess, European countries that are probably affluent, probably developed, probably fairly stable. Why wouldn't it be that Magdalena and the board would suggest at the next meeting, the next board meeting, well, we've got to expand into a local country. You know, their business model looks to be pretty bulletproof. Retail parks, merchandising, buying at low prices, bang, 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 we're done. Okay. The third option, and again, if this isn't mentioned in one of the 6 variants across November 22 and February 23, I'd be surprised. The third option under Ansof's matrix is product development. In other words, new products. Now, the caveat here is sourcing those new products from the right places, probably the big boys, probably the big manufacturers. And we know that they source from all over the world, okay? And it is slightly more risky because these products are unknown, yeah? There's no history to them. Now, we see reference within the pre-scene in several places that it's a big problem trying to predict what consumers are going to do, what they're going to like, and indeed how long they're going to like it for. But certainly that third option of developing new products or sourcing new products from their range of manufacturers is definitely on the cards. The last option with Ansof's matrix is something that I don't think is on the cards for Happy Playz and the board, and it is diversification. I cannot see a company like Happy Playz diversifying by moving into a new market with a new product, because that's what diversification means. I mean, it could be related to diversification or, you know, related to something, some core competency they have. I think it's highly unlikely. So let's think, when we think about using a model like that, and we could do, we're not going to get examined on it. Let's think market penetration, market development, and product development. Okay. So listen, I'm going to take a break just there. I did want to break a little bit of a while ago. Hold on 1 second. 1 second. Bear with me 1 second. Okay. So everybody, I'm going to take a break just now. Thank you for listening so far. Let's just take maybe 7 or 8 minutes, if you don't mind. I want to get through several more pages of the pre-scene and allow a little bit of time for a Q&A towards the end. Do remember that this webinar is about you. It's not about me rambling on for 2 hours. I will field as many questions as I have towards the end, and I'll take questions on anything. The pre-scene information that we've covered, the pre-scene information that we haven't covered, if you like, or even any query that you have in relation to this particular case. So thanks for sticking with me so far over the last hour or hour and a half, whatever it's been. And I'll see you in around about 7 or 8 minutes. Okay, cheers.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the webinar. I hope you had a nice little break there from me. So where are we right just now? Just a little recap in relation to this company, what we know so far, which is very little. Yeah. The first key point is that we have an entity that has a very, very solid, successful business model for the last 30 years in this Westarian toy market as a retailer. We can see from the detail that's provided about the industry that this is a flourishing industry with several big players, as we'll see just in a moment. In terms of their positioning, they're a 10% market share compared to their main competitor, Gleetil, at 15%. And indeed, if you combine those two at 25, they're just ahead of the biggest toy reseller in this Westarian market, which are the supermarkets at 23%. Okay. Now, referencing it back to the MCS exam, have we established anything so far? Well, a couple of things. There are a number of references just in the first 4 or 5 pages to content areas of E2, P2, and F2. And as we flow through the course, I think it's essential for each of you to be making notes on the sorts of areas that we highlight, whether or not that is P2 risk, the TARA framework, whether or not it's health and safety, whether or not it's possible references to stakeholders and stakeholders management, or possibly their simple business model of retail parks plus merchandising plus buying in cheap. You know, let's be familiar and indeed get you familiar with your role. And remember, as I said, this is a role play exam. You are a financial manager. Let's start thinking about that from really day one, which is today. Okay, so let me screen share again with you and run through the next couple of pages. Okay, now we're on to, I think, page 6 here. A couple of things, a couple of references here that I want to highlight. The first one, this particular page talks about the big players in this market, not least, obviously, the independent toy retailers, the toy shop chains, of which Happy Playz and Gleetil are the 2 big boys. In fact, the 2 only boys in this market at 10% and indeed 25%. We have one catalog store, covers, yeah, and moving down the page, we have one online retailer, browser shop. And the last one, the big boy, as it were, 23% of toys in this market are sold via supermarkets. Now, if we were looking at this page, I guess in real life, as it were, you know, what sort of things would we be thinking about, and what sort of things would Magdalena Partika, the CEO and the board, be thinking about going forward? Yeah, I think 2 main things. The first one is that it's clear that toy shop chains have worked in the past. Why have they worked? As you'll see referenced within the narrative here and highlighted, is the main reason why this aspect of Happy Playz business model has been a big plus is accessibility, yeah, i.e. road networks like motorways, etc. So in other words, their location, the location of these 120 stores. Bear in mind that Gleetil have 150 stores. That's 270 spread across Western. That's a fairly high number. And when you look at the revenues across the 2 companies, you can see it gets even better. So accessibility, and indeed outside of that, range of products. In other words, the product lines. Yeah, all of these retailers will be stocking video games, bikes, and indeed toys. Consumers want access to that. I think the third key thing, the third area, is really the extra facilities that are available for consumers within these retail parks. You know yourself, if you're going to go, let's say, and buy a toy for someone, you're probably going to have lunch. Maybe you're going to go to the movies. Maybe you're going to get your hair done. So the beauty of the retail parks on the plus side is the experience of being at a retail park. Okay. Now, there's also a flip side for me to retail parks. And if you do any research on this area, you'll see this very, very quickly. The retail park model is not bulletproof because retail park owners, retail park managers are dependent for their success on having each of their retail units occupied. And you probably know yourself in your experience of going to retail parks, if you walk into a retail park and half the units are closed, that's a big, big turnoff. So to some extent, you know, Happy Playz, who are sort of placing themselves as a sort of an agent, aren't they, between manufacturers and customers. They're sort of the middleman, as it were. They're dependent upon making sure that there is sufficient footfall within the given retail park for people to come and buy toys. If there isn't, they have a problem. It doesn't matter how good their merchandising is. If no people are coming through that park, there's a major issue. So that's a weakness, I would say, within their business model, and one to note for us, okay? The other thing that I pick up from this particular page, which basically details the 5 main players in this market, is something referenced here in relation to the online area. Yeah, you'll see the reference on the right-hand side to certainly the online retailers posing the biggest threat. Why? Why do people buy online? The big, big reason is ease and price. Okay. Now we know that a certain proportion of Happy Playz sales comes through their own website. That's great. They've got their bases covered. But the largest proportion, I would suggest, is through retail stores. So when we mentioned about expansion, when we mentioned about strategic options going forward, it must be that a focus on online has to be at the forefront of the mind of the executive board. Absolutely, because this is a massive threat to this industry. Okay. Just down the page here, a couple of things. There's reference to IFRS 11, yeah, and the whole possibility of the examiner bringing in a joint arrangement in some way. Now, in my experience, whether or not it's IFRS 11 or indeed just group accounts, IFRS 10, in my experience of dealing with marking MCS scripts where that whole group accounts area comes up, or something along the lines of a joint arrangement, very often it's not well dealt with. Particularly, I would add, if there's anyone on the call today who is a gateway student, and there was someone coming in who's been exempted from the operational and the management level, comes in at the MCS level. This is a major, major red flag for gateway students. F2, yeah? F2 is your nemesis, because virtually every single gateway student that I have come across hasn't studied standards in any great detail in their MBA. It won't be in there. If it is, it'll be in there to a very low degree. But even apart from that, if you're not a gateway student, this is an area that students underperform in. So what are we going to do about it? We need to understand only the basics of every standard with an F2. We do not need to think that the MCS exam is a retest of those tricky F2 questions that relate to standards, and there are loads of them. I've seen them. Yeah, we need to have a broad idea of each of the standards. There's probably within F2 only about 6 or 7 standards. There's not that many. So make sure you make a note, because he tends to examine these areas and students tend to underperform. Okay. Just as an aside, when we think about a joint arrangement, it's pretty straightforward. There's nothing overly complicated within IFRS 11. We're talking about joint control. We're talking about using the equity method. We're talking about, an arrangement when financial accounts are produced, very similar to accounting for an associate in some way
shape, or form. Okay, let's move on to the next page here. Bear with me 1 second. A couple of points I want to raise here. Reference to key strategic models. As you can see up top, we have reference to key players. Now, we are familiar, or we should be familiar, with our go-to model on stakeholders. This has been examined in the MCS exam a couple of times since the new syllabus was introduced in November 2019. I'm talking about Mendelow's matrix, okay? We need to understand where every stakeholder that's mentioned within the pre-scene places in terms of power and interest. Key players certainly are each of the main competitors. On top of that, the board of directors, including Magdalena and indeed Michael Anderson, the non-executive chair, and indeed the non-executive board. Who else would be key players? The shareholders, okay? So let's be familiar with the tool, i.e. Mendelow's matrix, and let's be familiar with each of the 4 quadrants. It's not overly difficult to understand, okay? Some element of strategic analysis is important to us. And remember, you know, for my money, using a model like Mendelow's matrix in your script is the simplest way to score a technical mark. Every single task that we come up against in the MCS exam is going to refer to stakeholders. Everyone, it's either going to be Magdalena, or it's going to be someone else, or it's going to be some other group, yeah? We can simply say, using a sentence or two, according to Mendelow's matrix, these would be under the banner of keep informed, i.e. high interest, low power, technical marks scored. If there's an easier mark in the MCS exam, I'd like to know what it is, because I never heard of it. Okay, next area, just moving down the page, right-hand side, a very, very important point to make here. Please make a note of this. There's reference here to just the idea of, project management, okay? Now, several points. The first one is that if you look back on every MCS exam that there has been since February 2015, you will not see a lot of project management / E2 tasks. Yeah, you won't, okay? It's not a topic area that gets often examined in the MCS exam. It's as simple as that. Check it if you want, okay? Does that mean it's never going to be examined? No, it doesn't, but it just doesn't get examined often. Okay, when it is examined, yeah, where does he go to? Well, I can tell you he goes to one area and he goes to it very nearly every time. So if it is coming up, my hunch is it's coming up reference to teams, yeah, reference to building a team, forming a team, what a successful team is. So let's be up on the theory in relation to teams. We know the theory, norming, storming, etc., you know, we know what a successful team needs to do. We also know reference within the E2 syllabus to leadership and indeed styles of leadership. That's an area for us to focus in on. If we move over to the left-hand side of the page, you'll see that there's reference there to something that we've discussed already today, which is digital disruption. Okay, now a couple of things here. There's a little example. I love students who build into their scripts very clearly, very quickly, and very succinctly references to the real life industry. Why? Am I contradicting myself based on what I said at the beginning of this webinar? What I said at the beginning of the webinar is the MCS examiner repeatedly says you do not have to be an industry expert, and there's no specific extra marks for industry knowledge. That's what I said, and I stand by it. But if you have a good feel for the real life industry, it gives you more context. But over and above that, if you're able, for example, bottom left of the screen, when you see reference to the toy box club. Yeah. Now that is a great idea, but what is it? If you were able to reference that in the right type of task, I think it differentiates you from the people sitting around you. So what does it mean? I've got some notes for you on this. Basically, the Toy Box Club is, as referenced in the note here, just a subscription service, yeah, based in the UK, where parents, or indeed anyone, can pay a monthly subscription of £35 a month, and each month they get a new box of toys. At the end of the month, that box gets sent back and a new box arrives. So think about it. I mean, £35 a month is not an unreasonable amount of money, but it's not loads and loads to get a new set of toys. What happens with the toys? They get cleaned up, they get sent out to someone else. Why is something like that becoming very, very popular in the real life industry? Several reasons. Number one, convenience. Number two, space saving. And number three, for parents, hassle-free. It comes in, children play, it goes out, okay? So just an idea and indeed reference to the use of short and sweet industry examples, yeah? Right-hand side of the page, there's reference there to sources of long-term funds. We touched on that in the very first page, if you recall. That's an area within F2 that we need to be familiar with, okay? Now, bottom right-hand side, yeah, there's a reference here to, under this retailers and manufacturers banner, there's a reference to Porter's value chain. Now, a couple of things here. The first one is that within the management level syllabus, yeah, and indeed particularly E2 and indeed P2, the whole area of strategic analysis, both internal and external, was removed in November 2019. So basically, most, if not all, of the Porter details information was shifted up into the strategic level, particularly P3. So I guess the chances of us getting a direct question on Porter's value chain, or indeed Porter's 5 forces or Porter's diamond, is low, if not non-existent. But does that mean that they're unimportant? No. Understanding Porter's value chain is important for a business like this, even if it isn't a manufacturer. A little bit of revision. What does the value chain mean? And what is a chain in reference to a company like Happy Playz? Well, let's think about it. The Porter's value chain is all about efficiency. It's all about two different areas of the business. Excuse me, primary activities on the bottom, 5, including, as mentioned, marketing right at the end, and indeed secondary activities at the top. Yeah, everything other than primary activities. Now, the essence of it is for a business to apply Porter's value chain and to become more efficient, to take its business apart based on each of the 9 elements, 4 secondary, 5 primary, yeah, and to say to themselves, well, are any of these activities non-value adding? If they are, let's get rid of them and let's reattach the chain, yeah? So a little bit of research, even though this area has been removed from the syllabus, is not a bad idea, yeah? If I can draw your attention to the left-hand side of the page, where there's a reference to the risk management area of P2 and this maximax, maximin, etc. Now, again, a little bit like one or two other topics that I've mentioned, this area, when it's examined, in my experience of marking mock exams, yeah, this sort of decision criteria where we're stuck without probabilities. And indeed, they are stuck without probabilities, aren't they, in this market? Who can predict what people are going to want to buy and in what volume over the next 3, 6, 9 months, even if the product is already available? Extremely difficult. As we say, the whole demand, the whole forecasting area for Happy Playz is an absolute nightmare. And it's the same for the manufacturers. Wouldn't it be sensible to use a reasonably bulletproof model such as maximax, maximin, Yes, it would. But my point in relation to the mock exams is where that's examined by the examiner, it's never well dealt with. When it's in a mock exam, it's very rarely. I would say the number of students that really have a firm grip on it in order to be able to write about it and to apply their knowledge to a given scenario, probably a table of some kind, is probably around 20 to 30%. The rest of the students are just, well, they're not sure what they're talking about, put it that way. Okay. Now, moving on from there, we will close fairly soon. I will be heading towards a Q&A. As I say, I'll take any questions that you want. I just wanted to talk to you about a couple of areas here, yeah, on the top of this page, okay? Now, right-hand side, yeah, this particular section and the previous page really talks about what can manufacturers do, yeah? In other words, how can they keep ahead of the market? How can they ensure or indeed maintain their levels of revenues? The first option is basically just change existing products, incremental changes. Yeah. The second one, as you'll see there, is new products. Excuse me. The third one is licensed products. Yeah. So let's go back up to the top. So making changes. Now, right-hand side, there's a reference there to something that the examiner likes, the life cycle. You've heard of it, you're familiar with it, I hope. We're talking about the 4 main areas of a given product's life cycle. We're talking about intro, growth, maturity, and decline, okay? And what I'd ask you to do is let's do a little bit research on those areas. In other words, what do they mean? With particular reference to pricing. Because more often than not, when the examiner puts this in play, what he's going to want you to do is suggest what are the pricing options in each of the levels, whether or not it's penetration, premium, discount, whatever. Okay, so let's be up on the PLC and those 4 areas. That's point number 1 on this page. The other point is left-hand side here, where it talks about business ecosystems. Okay, now that phrase should be something that's familiar to you because this whole area of ecosystems was brought in the change of syllabus in November 2019, and it was brought in as a new topic. Okay, now what do we mean by that? Well, as it suggests within the notes, we're talking about basically liaisons and cooperations between many players within industries. So I guess in one way, we're moving away from this area of, oh, here's the market, and it's sort of very rigid and precise, to an idea that there are multiple ecosystems, and indeed they are interconnected in a multitude of different ways. So in essence, what I'm saying is that, you know, within these new business ecosystems, let's forget talking about markets, let's talk about ecosystems. We're saying that technology, yeah, whatever it is driving change. Yeah. And again, let's refer back to the new content within E2. What does that mean? What technology is driving change in the toy industry? It could be anything. 3D printing, use of the cloud, IoT, etc., etc. So again, all those new technology related areas, disruptive areas within the E2 syllabus as of November 2009 are important to us. Okay. A couple of other points, just right-hand side here. There's a reference to under the area of new products. Now, I mentioned Ansoff's matrix 20-30 minutes ago. Okay, Ansoff's matrix is not a model that you'll be overly familiar with right now, but it's a good model. You may recall I said product expansion, the expansion of your product range of your business. Yeah. Now, the 3 or 4 areas that I mentioned, you know, market penetration, market development, product development. This is the key for me to the future success of this business. I mean, you know, what else can they be doing in order to maintain or grow their position outside of getting into a new neighboring market, let's say, developing new products along with manufacturers, or possibly even manufacturing products themselves, yeah, or in some way just penetrating further and doing more of what they actually do, i.e. market penetration. So just remember, even though one or two models are not relevant to the syllabus, can't be examined directly, they can still help us populate a script, okay? So that's the reference to E2, bottom right-hand side. Just one or two other things. When we think about F2, where it references innovation, so new innovative products, you know, let's remember the basic reference within IS38 to the R&D versus development expenditure. I talked earlier on about a failing of gateway students not understanding the basics of each of the 6 or 7 standards in F2. This would also go perhaps for some students who come all the way through CIMA, okay? So when we think about, oh, they're going to launch a new product, you know, they're going to spend money on research and development. Oh, will it be capitalized or will it be expensed? It's not that difficult to learn off those key conditions that underlie the accounting treatment. And yet, unfortunately, when I mock exams, students don't know those conditions. So let's be savvy on what is research and development, yeah? In what circumstances can it be capitalized, and in what circumstances must it be expensed in the profit and loss account, okay? So listen, I'm going to leave it there for the run through. We're going to finish off the pre-scene and indeed all of the other key elements of the day after tomorrow in pre-scene part 2. I'm now going to switch to Q&A. We did have a little bit of extra time at the start there, so we lost a little bit of time there, but nonetheless, I think we've covered as much as we need to in one day. I'm going to stop the share and just see what I have within the Q&A. And indeed, if you have any questions on what I've said so far over the course of the last hour and 40 minutes or thereabouts, or indeed in relation to any other matter in relation to your studies, please do pipe in now. Let me just take a look at the Q&A and see if there's anything there that should be relevant. Okay. Okay, so need a study partner. Will we get, so Sanju, annotated version of the pre-scene today by email. I believe, Sanju, you asked a question there at 3:35 my time. I believe that the annotated version of the pre-scene will be available. I'm not sure if it comes out by email, to be honest with you, but certainly I think it is available very shortly after the webinar, okay? Lindsay Falconer, yes, same question and indeed same answer, Lindsay. Let me know if that makes sense to you, okay? And Samuel, same question. Okay. Yeah, Samuel, in relation to the calculator, you have your on-screen calculator as part of the CBE platform. So not your own calculator, the on-screen calculator. Okay, Flor Maria, you're asking about the recording. Flor, my understanding of the recording of this pre-scene element part 1 is that it should be up on the portal within the next 24 hours or thereabouts. Okay, certainly within 24 hours, I would suggest that it will be up on the portal. Okay, Flor, I hope that, that you found that helpful. Okay, anonymous attendee, if you failed in November 22, could you get the same pre-scene if you decided to resit in February 23? Anonymous attendee, yes, the pre-scene is exactly the same, yeah? So November 22, February 23, exactly the same. But anonymous attendee, we're not planning to fail in November 22. We're passing. Do remember the story that I told you, anonymous attendee, of the student that goes from resitting to a prize winner. That's a true story. How? This is something to do with me? Nothing to do with me. I didn't win the prize. He simply, anonymous attendee, changed his approach. Simple as that. Changed his approach. Okay? That's all we need to do. Okay? Olofu, thank you for answering that question. Okay. So we have a question from Naweed. How important is typing speed in the exam? Would it be okay, advisable to use mnemonics such as Hey P for Happy Playz, or G for gletal in our responses? That's a really, really good question, Naveed, a really good question and a smart question too. Okay, first things first, okay? When you say typing speed, I guess in one way, what you're talking about is length as well, aren't you? Because if someone is a fast typer, they type more in the 3 hours. If someone's a slow typer, they don't type as much. So let me reverse it on you. Several things. Within the MCS exam, I don't care who you are, a short script is a failing script, okay? A short script is a failing. Not writing it enough, I don't care if it's brilliant, the chances of passing, yeah, are low. On the other side of the fence, if you're writing more in 3 hours than around about 2,500 words, so if there's smoke, Naweed, coming off your keyboard and there's fire around the table because you're typing so quickly, because you're a fantastic high-speed typer, there's a problem, yeah? Because in a case study exam, whether it's the MCS or another case study exam, it's quality that's important as well. So I'm talking about the right amount of volume and good quality or reasonable quality. Now, what does 2,500 words mean for an average typist? It's not a lot. I can do 2,500 words in less than 3 hours, and I'm a two-finger man, okay? So if you look at the 4 tasks at the MCS level, yeah, 4 tasks, approximately 600 to 700 words each or thereabouts, yeah? That means if there's a 50-50 split across each task, so each task is split into requirement 1, 50%, requirement 2, 50, then ballpark, you're talking about 300 words or thereabouts, maybe 350 for each task. So that should be your aim, yeah? Now, if you try to type out 2,500 words in 3 hours, even with 2 fingers, you'll have no problem. And that allows for room for planning, yeah? You must plan your answers based on what you see in the requirement. More of that later on in the course, okay? So in a nutshell, Naweed, I don't think that high-speed typing is important, not at all. I think planning is important, and I think allocation of time between each task, yeah? One big mistake, Naweed, that I've seen with students, whether or not they're fast or slow, is within a given task, if there's a 50-50 split, they'll favor one part, write more for that, and very little for the task they don't like. That's crazy. We're talking about a failing task there. Absolutely, okay? So there's several things to consider in relation to your question. The most important one is there doesn't need to be smoke and fire, yeah? We do need to practice. We need to be reasonably quick, but not more than average, okay? Naveed, I hope that helps you. Okay, Bongani, an extra question bank besides the mock exam. That's a very good question. I can tell you, Bongani, that 5 mock exams within one course is absolutely ample in terms of practice. I really don't think that there's a requirement. If you're well prepped on knowledge of the pre-scene, the strategic analysis, and the basics of the company, I don't think there's a requirement to do too much more writing than 5 mock exams, apart from perhaps go back to the past exam guides and do some practice questions based on old topics on old pre-scenes, okay? I'm not sure if there is over and above the mock exams, Bongani, extra questions. I will check that and get someone to come back to you. Robin, what would be considered a digital ecosystem? A number of things, fintech, cryptocurrency, probably not the toy industry, I wouldn't have thought, given the nature of the players and the nature of the interrelationship between the players and indeed the supply chains, certainly not the toy industry. Okay, so MD, what elements of do you want us to focus on in relation to familiar yourself with all models of the MCS? But what elements? So I think what you're saying, MD, is if we look at the three subjects, which subject areas do I want you to, I think that's what you're saying, MD. If that's what you're saying, what I would be suggesting to you is that the core of those elements are the mock exam questions and indeed the answers, okay? A lot of students, MD, when they start studying for this exam, the very first thing that they do, and I'm talking, unfortunately, about underperforming students, the first thing that they do, MD, is they get a Kaplan textbook out, yeah, and start reading it late into the night. That's like trying to find a needle in a haystack. We don't study, in my opinion, too much content that's not related to the pre-scene. We want to be studying, MD, the content of the three management level subjects in the context of Happy Play. You know, if you're going to read a P2 Kaplan text or an F2, read a comic instead. Read a comic about Batman. It will help you more, yeah? Anything that we do in relation to active study has to be in the context of Happy Playz. So the mock exams, the pre-scene, a little bit of industry research, practice on past exam questions with that old task wrapped around Happy Playz. It's simple to do. MD, let me know if that makes sense. Okay, Aneta, you're asking how much of the bikes and videos as important to discuss reference. They seem to be excluded from the finance. Is this correct? Yeah, you are correct. Not excluded from the finances as such. They're certainly not excluded from the finances, Aneta, but they are excluded from the breakdown of that 7.8 billion, i.e. the market size, let's call it 8 billion. So, you know, in terms of referencing them, Aneta, I'd be referencing them subject to the task that I've been asked. But, you know, this is a company, Aneta, that sells a large amount of bikes and indeed video games. It's a significant element. Exactly how much, we don't know. So I hope that answers your question. I wouldn't be, if you're suggesting, Aneta, oh, well, they're not important, I wouldn't have that view. Definitely not. Because I think, Aneta, that when you look at the revenues for Gleetil, yeah, if you look at the Gleetil financials, it's 50% more. Why? They have bigger stores, they have bigger products, they have more room for a larger range of bikes, probably more video games. Seems a pretty simple option for expansion for us, doesn't it? Yeah, in that area, you know. So notwithstanding that, there are some concerns about the financials for Gleetil, not least that they've got a published loss. But nonetheless, if you want more revenue, it seems to me one option is expand your stores or expand your range of stores and or expand your product range in bikes and video games. Absolutely. It's a no-brainer, Aneta. It's a no-brainer. Okay. Arnaz, you're asking, would it be sharing previous year's questions and reading this pre-scene? I think that Thomas answered that question in the early part of this webinar, Arnaz, if you're here. And I think what Thomas said is that the answer is no. But what's to stop us doing that, Arnaz? It's simple to get your hands on a post-exam guide. Just Google CIMA post-exam guide or post-exam kit. It'll bring you to that page where you've got the last 3 or 4, I'm sure, starting with November 21, February 22. Going backwards, okay? Note that the most recent guide hasn't been published yet. So May, August, I don't think is going to be available until later this year, November, December. So probably after the next exam, okay? After the next exam. And Arnaz, I hope that helps. Let me know. Okay, Mohammed. Okay, Mohammed, you're saying it's been a great session so far. How to construct answers, okay. Okay, you're welcome, Mohammed. How to construct the answers and to what degree in detail we should relate IFRS standards to our responses. In no detail, whatsoever unless the standard has been specifically referenced. I get the impression from your narrative, Mohammed, that are you suggesting that we should be bringing in reference to accounting standards as much as we can? Is that what you're saying? What I'm saying, no. Where the examiner brings in accounting standards or reference to areas of F2, it's invariably very specific. You'll know exactly what it won't be up in the air. Some of the other perhaps vaguer E2 sort of waffly type questions, you could say anything, yeah, but not when it comes to F2 and indeed the standards. He will be specific, okay? Okay, Bungani, the pass guarantee, I've heard it sit February due out to the May case. That's a very good question that I'm going to have to ask one of my colleagues to answer. I'm not sure about that. Bungani, this is the first time that I've delivered this MCS course, and I've been working with Viva Tuition for a couple of months now. So I'll try and get someone to answer that question. I'm not sure whether or not the pass guarantee cuts out after the next sitting. So I'll try and get someone who's listening on the call to answer that question. Apologies, Gangani, that I can't give you an answer. Okay. Okay, MD, is there anything you would advise an accounting gateway student, as I'm a bit worried to cover all the topics within the set time frame? Yes, there is a couple of things. Let's keep it brief. Gateway students, as mentioned, MD, within the webinar, have a nemesis. Yeah, in fact, they've got two, F2 and P2. Okay, but F2 first. MD, what you need to do is you need to go back more than other students to the past exams and indeed to find questions that are F2 relevant and answer them and fail them miserably. Make the answers up, just waffle, use BS, and then check the model solution. That's the fastest way, MD, to learn about content that you're not sure about or that you don't know anything about. That's the fastest way to get up to speed, to get up to around about a passing standard. Yeah. So for a gateway student, F2 first, get on it, do a question every day or two if you can, fail them, mess them up, check the model solution. Okay. And make sure that you're savvy with every single standard, MD, in the F2 syllabus, because they're coming up. Okay. Mohammed question, well, when typing answers, there possibly that one can have a grammatical spelling of, no, it doesn't. Grammatical or spelling errors completely irrelevant for case study exams. Yeah, do not worry about grammar and spelling. I mean, if we can get things right, happy days, but you don't get marked down by being sloppy in your spelling and your grammar. Okay, I hope that helps, Mohammed. Okay, Samuel, you're asking about, would paper be available for one to plan his answer on, would be on the screen? It's on screen on the scratch pad, Samuel, I believe. I think on screen on the scratch pad, not on paper. No paper allowed. Okay, MD. Okay, MD, I think you answered that question. You've asked that question up top, haven't you? And I think I answered it. Yeah, in terms of what elements for MCS prep. Okay, I'm thinking the elements that Viva mentioned within their mock exams and past papers. Look at what's been examined previously. Okay, bear with me 1 second. Bear with me, apologies. My Surface Pro seems to have a mind of its own when it comes to the battery. Okay, so these are good questions, everybody. I hope that I'm dealing with everything in order. If I'm not, my apologies. Okay, so let's look at what do we have next. Okay, so Mohammed we got, okay. Okay. I think I'm dealing with everything. I hope I am. There's quite a lot of chat here, so it's tricky to get everything in, okay? So I've got a question from anonymous attendee. Where would be getting the link to register for All Access Pass? I believe that would be directly anonymous on the website, on the face of the homepage even. If you click on it, I'm sure that you can click through, and I hope you'll be joining us, Mr. Anonymous. Okay, Abdul. Join CIMA through the exemptions route and period of management. Do I have to study? Okay, so that's a very similar question, Abdul, to what we've had before. With a student arriving at the exemption route for the MCS exam, my advice would be the same. I would leave E2 and go for F2 and P2, go to past papers and do practice questions based on old pre-scenes and watch for the standards within F2, okay? That's what I would say, Abdul. And indeed, come back again on Monday and ask more questions. Okay. Bear with me 1 second, everybody. There's quite a few questions, so just making sure I get them all is a task in itself. Is a task in itself, for sure. Bear with me. I think I'm getting most of the questions. If I have missed your question, my apologies. I'm trying to get as many as possible. Okay. Okay, bear with me 1 second. Okay, MD, thank you. I'm glad it did make sense. And Abdul, you're very welcome. Lindsay, how do you think we should tackle all this? I must admit to feeling a bit overwhelmed. There is 26 pages of the pre-scene, plus I also need to go back and revise topics as well as thinking, okay, how can I refer to the pre-scene, etc. Is it just me? Lindsay, welcome to my world. You know, welcome to, Lindsay, the MCS exam. Yeah, this is part of it. And this is the challenge that CIMA set MCS students. They know that you're busy at work. They know that you're busy at home. They know that there's 26 pages. They know that there's 3 topics. This is part of it, Lindsay. So I would say if you're feeling overwhelmed, to be honest with you, and with all due respect, excellent, excellent, because that's exactly how we should feel. Now what we've got to do, Lindsay, is follow through. Find a good tuition company, yeah? Find a tutor, yeah? And follow through on the steps that are outlined within this course and be positive and practice, practice, practice. Lindsay, I don't know if you were here at the very start when I told the story about Simon Jenkinson, if you want to check him out. When I spoke to him on the phone, Lindsay, he was in, I would say, well, I won't use the word depressed, but he was seriously down in the dumps. Overwhelmed would be an understatement for him, yeah? Because he thought he'd prepared properly. All we need to do, Lindsay, is prepare properly, yeah? Work hard and do what our tutors or our lecturers, and indeed what the tuition companies tell us to do, yeah? Lindsay, thousands of students have passed this exam, yeah? Just in the last year. How? Was it luck? Are they all more intelligent than you? I doubt it, Lindsay. So this is totally normal, totally normal. Let's follow the steps, Lindsay. Okay, Anessa, you're asking for a live example in ecosystem within the toy industry. Well, I would say, Annetta, if you look at the setup of Happy Playz, yeah, look at their business model and look at the relationships and the networks, yeah, of relationships that they have across the world, yeah. They source products from the biggest toy manufacturers in the world, from the ones in the middle, and from the smaller ones, yeah? In fact, they're probably sourcing from China. So their relationship with each of those suppliers and indeed distribution logistics companies, yeah, is an ecosystem. That's an ecosystem, okay? Does that make sense, Anessa? And as mentioned earlier on, when we referred to stakeholder management, the management of those relationships is very, very important. And, you know, if you think, Annetta, about, you know, the application, let's say, of Porter's 5 forces to your question, yeah? How difficult is it when we think about the threat of new entrants? So when we think about the toy industry in Wistaria, the threat of new entrants into that industry, in other words, the force, how strong is it? Yeah. So really what we're talking about is barriers to entry. I mean, look how difficult it would be, Annetta, to find your way in to that ecosystem and to start building your own network very, very quickly. I think that's going to take years. It's taken Happy Playz 30 years, and they're only at 10%. Yeah. So that's a simple example of the ecosystem, including their main suppliers and indeed a number of related industries. I hope that makes sense, Annetta. Okay, Nisha, there's no difference between Gateway MCS and normal SCS. No difference at all, apart, Nisha, from the pass rates. The pass rates are lower for Gateway MCS students than they are from the normal students for the reasons that I've outlined. Okay, so MD, you mentioned F2 and which one? P2, MD, P2, yeah? F2 and P2, with F2 first. Okay, Sangeeta, if you look at the syllabus, yeah, you're asking about a list of IFRS and indeed IS. If you look at the syllabus and indeed our notes on F2, you'll see the list, yeah? But you can easily find the syllabus by Googling CIMA F2 syllabus. You can easily find it, and there's reference to the standards there. Okay, Andrew. Okay, no question. Oh, Andrew, thank you very much. Thank you very much. This is my first time, Andrew, so it's the first time that I've done, not a webinar, I do webinars all the time, it's the first time that I've run through a detailed pre-scene like that. So I'm hoping that I'll probably be better on Monday than I was today. It's the first time I've really taught students without interacting with them through a pre-scene, but I know that, I know how important that is to do, but it's the first time I've done it online, as it were. Okay, so if I was a little bit dicky here and there, Andrew, my apologies. Okay, so Lindsay, I think I've answered that question. Sorry, Andrew, I missed your question. Okay, Anonymous, you're very welcome. Do come back, please. I will be here tomorrow and Monday. Okay, a question from Mohammed about toy industry as part of the MCS. We would never refer to a past MCS exam, if that's what you're asking me, Mohammed. Yeah. What I'm saying is we go back to an old exam and practice a question by wrapping that old requirement, that old task round Happy Playz pre-scene. It's not bulletproof, but it's better than sitting there and watching Netflix. Yeah. Okay, Mohammed, let me know if that makes sense. Okay, Lindsay, you're welcome. Anna. Okay, how do you take, and it depends on, in terms of taking part in the second part, it depends on if you're signed on or not. My understanding that today is live and free to all entrants, all attendees, but then if you want to attend from tomorrow is the industry section, and then Monday is pre-scene part 2. Okay, so I believe that if you want to attend after today, you need to sign up for a course with Viva. Okay, Nisha, you're welcome. Mohammed, you're welcome. Okay, listen, we're sort of just about roundabout time. I think it's sort of gone okay, notwithstanding the point that I made to your colleague up top. I think it was Andrew, about this being my first time walking through a pre-scene in detail. So I hope to be better by Monday. It was a lot to take in, and then a lot of questions afterwards, but it has been enjoyable. I hope that some of the points that I've made in terms of practical E2, P2, and F2 relevant points have made sense. And then over and above that, I hope that you've made some notes about exam technique. Because listen, everybody, you know, these exams, the case study exams, MCS, and even more so, SCS, are not a test just of what you know. They're a test of what you can do. This is a role play exam. So if you're worried about F2, if you're worried about P2, if you're worried about E2, etc., don't worry overly, just follow the advice that we give you. You can plug the gaps over the next 4 or 5, 6 weeks for sure by practicing. And also, as you practice in the mock exams, when your back is against the wall, I'm in a mock exam, it's task 2, part A, I haven't a clue. I don't know, it's a P2 topic, I hate P2. I don't know what I'm going to write. I tell you what I'm doing. I'm writing something. The examiner, the marker, doesn't know what I don't know. So I'm cobbling something together, and that skill, call it waffle, call it whatever you want, that skill of being able to write something when you're not sure or you're a bit stuck only comes from practice. And that is the key, or one of the keys to success. Failing MCS students, with respect, do not practice. They want to find out, again with respect, what they don't know on the real exam day. That's too late. They're dead men and women walking. We need to find out what we don't know now, because then we can plug what we don't know. We can find out, is it F2? Is it the standards? Is it investment appraisal? Is it digital disruption on all those various new areas introduced in November 2019? The mock exams, apart from good support from Thomas and Hugh, and indeed me, the mock exams and indeed the recorded content within the Viva platform are the key to your success. So my final point is that anyone who tells you that passing the MCS exam is some crazy thing in outer space and you have to be a genius, that's a load of nonsense. Yeah, it's nonsense. What you have to do is recognize what you're up against and do enough of the right activities and avoid the wrong activities. And we now know what they are because you've attended this webinar. So listen, I look forward to seeing you all again. Tomorrow is our industry analysis, and indeed Monday is part 2 of our pre-scene analysis, and hopefully I'll be even better than I was. If I wasn't even any good today, I don't know. Okay, so listen, thank you very much, everybody. I'm going to call it a day there, and I'm going to take a break from my work because I've been up since early, and I wish you all well, and I look forward to seeing you again as soon as possible, and good luck with your studies. Cheers.